Uh, we're going to get started here. Huh? I can't hear you, Sonny. We're going to get started here. If you don't mind, we'll open up with a prayer. Would you, if you would, please?
Heavenly Father, we ask for your presence here this evening as we come together to worship you, and just ask you to lift up our hearts during these dark times as we wait expectantly for your coming. In Christ's name,
Amen. Okay. Austin's gonna leave us he's going to federal court duty, so pray for him. I said if he's himself, he'll be back tomorrow, so. See you, Austin.
Or if you need anything on the road.
All righty. Just some headlines too, and just keep some of this in mind as we go through this update, because these are all kind of intermingled and intertwined with what is happening on the planet and in the world. The Chinese have invaded U.S. waters again. Now, last week they were in Hawaii or near Hawaii. They're threatening Hawaii. They're threatening the United States. This week they came into the waters off Alaska with 3 Navy ships, and the Coast Guard trailed them, and there was jets overhead. So they're doing to us what we're doing to them as they traverse the South China Sea and try to claim those territories. The United States is saying, well, they're not your seas. And we showed that clip last week where the UK, us, and I can't remember, there was another country with us, we had some Navy ships together off of Japan and going through the China Sea there. So tit for tat, things keep ramping up. North Korea fires off another missile unexpectedly toward in the waters off Japan there. Israel says, Iran and the United States says, because the IREA says that Iran is within 30 days of a nuclear weapon. So we'll continue to watch that. Biden's ratings are going down, 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 even amongst his own people. One of the telling things is when you look at CNN, when you look at BBC and some of these other media agencies, when you see that they start talking about Biden's administration and how fed up some people are with it, then you know that Biden is in trouble even with some of his own people. You know how that goes. We'll see how that goes. We've got a long time to go with President Biden. Denmark has pulled all its restrictions from COVID. No more restrictions, period, which is really weird, right in the middle of the Delta variant. And yet Australia is tripling down on what they're doing with all kinds of draconian stuff. Australia is just really out of control. New Zealand is fairly close behind them.
There's some big riots in Australia.
Pardon?
There's some big riots.
Yeah. People are across the world, and it's getting more and more. People are just kind of fed up. We're going to see how this Biden mandate goes in the United States. Whether they're going to, businesses and people are going to rise up and stand up. I mean, to have a business with over 100 employees and anybody doing business with the federal government has to have vaccines. I tell you what, if the revolt isn't here, it may be coming. We'll see how this all plays out. 2/3 of businesses, it's said, worldwide are having problems hiring people because of the COVID and because people are getting still unemployment. Unemployment in the United States is coming to an end, so there are some issues there, but we'll just continue to watch and see how that goes. And then Russia, as we just saw, Russia had its 3rd or 4th military war games here in the last year, and they had 200,000 troops in a large area, and they're just showing the world that they mean business and they're standing by. So those are some headlines as we get into this. Just continue to watch and think about those things as we go. A little bit of good news. This ex-Muslim plants 11 new churches in Libya. New believers baptized at the very place in Libya where ISIS beheaded 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians. So good news there. it continues. I mean, people continue to pay the price. I'm in contact with a couple of ministries, actually 3 ministries in the Philippines, and they continue to still have to deal with the government. The government is going through some issues as well. They want a new leader in there and all kinds of stuff, but they're really having to deal through these times. ISIS is prevalent even in the Philippines, even in southern Philippines and some of those places. So, but there's some good news there, and I think when things get dark, and especially if everything is getting dark, I think some people, the Lord will start using the darkness to show the light. And they'll start looking and start saying, something's wrong. Where's the hope? Even those people who are in the darkest of darks. In fact, when Israel was in the darkness of darkness, Jesus showed up as a baby. And so he'll do it again, starting these times. That's where we need to be ready for that. Koenig, let's just some headlines about Christianity. Christians previously imprisoned for their faith, they were let out, and they're now rearrested in Eritrea. Calls for international action after a church leader and 11 others killed in Nigeria. Continues killing of Christians in a big way in Nigeria. Christians in Afghanistan are facing new phase of crisis after lost contact with U.S. ministries. What will happen to evangelicals in the church in Wales? That's concerning the gay issue, splitting the church, and the evangelicals, even though the church told them, okay, you don't have to marry gay people. That was in their last ruling. However, they're being sidelined if they don't. And so the evangelical leaders of the church are being sidelined, and they're just concerned about what's going to happen to the evangelicals. We'll use that word again, I wanted to say, because we're going to touch on this name again here again. And it was John MacArthur and some others, and I'll say it again, who kind of led the way in saying, we're going to keep this word because it is a good word. It's the best one we have. Fundamentals didn't really work. Born again, what does that mean? We're going to stick with evangelicals, but evangelicalism is being misused, the word, and people claiming it. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. And then the head of the Southern Baptist Church Executive Committee questions Messenger's resolution in an abuse investigation. We mentioned this abuse investigation in the Southern Baptist Church, the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. And they're found that there's hundreds of abuse cases in the SBC, and there's been cover-up, and there's been issues, and now there's just some real infighting right now in the Southern Baptist Church over this, and so we're going to pray that this comes out. Justice needs to be done, just as we wanted it because of the Catholic Church or any other denomination or any other religion or any other person. We want justice to be done and people to be held accountable. So we'll see how that goes. But that, again, it's interesting. The thing that interests me about this is the timing of this SBC issue. Now, it's been coming up. It's been kind of, laid under the carpet and not really up in the news except for the last year. But now it's really raising its head right at the time where the church is being called into question like never before. I have to say like never before because the church is always called into question. But the church in the West, the evangelical church, is being called into question. What do you guys think? Who do you think you are? What's this Jesus rapture, resurrection, tribulation thing, and all this kind of stuff? And so just the timing of this couldn't be worse, except remember, God says, well, I think he's refining the church. I think that we have to battle our way through this. The church has really been through this in some ways before, but not in the convergence of this thing all over the earth, all around the world. And we have to battle through these times, stand for righteousness, and those people, the people that are in the church or, try to connect themselves with the church, misusing the word of God, misusing their positions and their leadership, they're gonna heap dung, if you will, on the church, and we're gonna have to go through this, and we have to stand the test of time, okay? Oh, you're one of those. Well, I'm not one of those, but I am one of those, okay? And we're gonna stand the test of time. So let's get into a little bit of interesting news. This one, okay, I don't have I thought I had the sound going, but I guess I don't. Not that we have to have a sound for music too much, but it just makes it a little pleasant. Did I hear a mm-hmm back there? Mm-hmm.
Racing champions, whether they are good milk animals, whether they are elite wolves, or whether they are beauty queens. We are concentrating on camels because we have so much demand for cloning camels that we are not able to cope up with the demand. We are producing plenty of, maybe more than 10, 20 babies every year.
Okay, now you remember, those of you who have been around for a while, you remember when we talked about Dolly the sheep? That's been a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But then the Chinese working on cloning cats. One of your pet cats dies or your dog dies and they'll clone it. So that started several years ago. Now these kinds of things are going to pay $100,000 for a camel. Think about how many camels have to die before they get 10 to 20 a year. So they're trying a lot of them, and a lot of them are not making it. But you know what kind of strikes me is the way they treat women over there. And now yet they're paying $100,000 for a camel so it will have the best drooping lips or something, you know. It's just a strange thing that's going on the planet, and cloning. And this, I'm not sure that God is happy with that. We have mentioned this before as well, that there is a doctor out there who wants to have a whole herd of woolly mammoths. They could walk the earth again if CRISPR startup succeeds. So remember, the CRISPR is the ones that are cutting out the DNA. By the way, that last video you heard them say, when we read it, it said it cut out the DNA of the original and inserted other DNA. And that's what they're doing. That's a very, very strange Genesis chapter 6 kind of thing, and other stuff. So, but they want to have a whole herd of woolly mammoths. Our true North Star, so their direction, is a successful restoration of the woolly mammoth, but also its successful rewilding into interbreeding herds in the Arctic, to bring their cold adapted genetic traits, which include small ears and more body fat, to their elephant cousins, a hybrid that can wander the tundra where mammoths haven't been seen for 10,000 years. We expect our first calves within 6 years and would develop artificial wombs to grow the embryos. Just growing 10 woolly mammoths with surrogate elephant mothers isn't enough to get the large-scale herds the company envisions. Our focus is on species preservation and protection of biodiversity right now, not putting them in zoos, So this is the days of Noah stuff. This is the stuff that to God, this is violence. This is tearing apart his creation and to build what he wants. This is the days of Noah stuff. Other news, Newsom won. Some people say the odds were against him, but he came out shining pretty bright out of this election. You remember the recall that was in California? He won fairly handedly. That tells you the state of California. And by the way, I was thinking, if he's going to double down on all this stuff that he has done, now that he's got all this courage now, Californians need to look out and stand up for what's right, what's going on there. So this division that's happening on the planet and in America and with the church and stuff. Now here's this stuff, and we say it's on conservatives. Now look at the conservative issue here, but remember what side the church is on. Conservative radio host who swore off vaccine dies after contracting COVID. Defiant to the end, a prominent anti-vax activist dies of COVID. A woman dies from COVID after visiting a state with low vaccination rates. So you see the target? And it's like, these are headlines. Like these people, these never vaxxers or whatever, are the bad people. And again, I'm not for vaccination or anti-vaccination. If you want to go get it, go get it. If you don't want it, the government should not tell you what to do. And remember, the final thing is you do it in faith. You live with your decision or die with your decision. Say, Lord, I'm coming home, whatever. Doesn't matter, as long as I do it in faith. But they're picking on the anti-vaxxers. And again, do I have to say that they're white? Okay, so there's that whole thing there. White. I mean, I'm sure there's anti-vaxxers that are maybe different skinned, but it's coming down to white, and then it's going to come down to white evangelicals. Okay, it just keeps coming down the pike. Unaware his conversation prior to a cabinet meeting was being broadcast live on Israel's Channel 12, Nitzan Horowitz, who is the health minister of Israel, told Interior Minister Shakid there is no epidemiological justification for the COVID passport, and it is only intended to pressure the unvaccinated to vaccinate. And then he goes on the air and says, we need, so you see what's happening. This hypocrisy is happening in all the nations, even in Israel. Again, in Israel, they were one of the states, one of the nations that had the most vaccinated. They were really proud of it. They got right on top of it, only to have the Delta variant take hold in a big way. Their numbers skyrocketed. They closed down some in some arenas again, and now they're fighting off this idea that they're not on top of things again. So it's just I'm here to say, with what I've seen in the news, what I've seen with these nations and what's happening with the variants and all these things, still nobody knows what's going on. Nobody really knows. We've had people who get vaccinated get sick. We've had people unvaccinated, get sick and then recover. So you've had all of this stuff, and there really isn't a good standard, a North Star, if you will. There really is no good standard for this. So we really continue to have to live in faith and do what's right for us and our family. Okay? So just remember that going forward. A new project invents Hebrew letters to make the language of the Bible gender neutral. Now you remember, I think it was back in the 70s, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was back in the 70s when the Reader's Digest came out with the gender neutral Bible, if I remember right. The Reader's Digest did one, and then from then on there was others that did it, and now it's hitting the Hebrew language, the Hebrew texts. And the last 5 years, let's say, as homosexuality has taken hold across the planet, and they have these gay parades in Tel Aviv, and then now Jerusalem. I think it's one thing for the Gentiles when that happens to the Gentiles. Heaven forbid it's the church, and it is the church. Some, what we call denominations of the church, if you will. But when it's hitting the church and God's people, Israel, I think that we can say, wow, this is like different. This is convergence. This is toward the end. This is bad. And so this stuff, you can bet that the Lord is not happy with what's going on over there. So let's talk about this. And I've mentioned this over the last month or so. I've been kind of talking about this issue. And this whole idea about, and this is a good term for it, political evangelicals. This is a good term for it. And this is what I want us, and I hope the church will be careful about going forward. Because this is what's happening. And again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to have looked into what was happening during the elections and after the elections and all that stuff about QAnon and what was happening there, and Christians rising up and promoting Trump like he's almost the Messiah, to say we've got a problem, and there's some good people, and I'd say this church, some of us in this church, me, was promoting, let's vote for Trump, let's do the right thing, let's have him, he's protecting our borders and all this other stuff. But what was happening in the elections, especially after the elections, and the QAnon conspiracies and all those things, and then what happened at the Capitol, and now, again, on that election night when Trump was elected and the word evangelical got thrown around, that's when it first started. Me and Gary talked about it. The word evangelical got thrown around. He got the evangelicals. And we started looking at the data and the information and who these people are, and we go, wait a minute. Are they evangelicals, or are they Christians? Are they what denomination are they? But they started calling themselves evangelicals. So watch what's read here. This is good. Despite tense polarization, there was no mass exodus from evangelicalism by white evangelicals who disliked Donald Trump, nor by his evangelicals of color during the 4 years of his presidency, the Pew Research Center found. So that's good news, okay? That's fine. The evangelicals kind of stayed. but according to analysis released Wednesday, more Americans started identifying as born again or evangelical Protestants between 2016 and 20 than stopped calling themselves evangelicals. So we got more evangelicals. They're calling themselves evangelicals, all right? The boost came almost entirely from white Trump supporters. Now, again, fake news and what do you believe, right? But Pew Research is pretty good at what they do. Pew and Barna and Lifeway and a couple others, these are really good at what they do. And they're saying that in the 4 years of Trump, the white evangelical numbers went up. Okay, well that's good. But why? Evangelicalism is not collapsing despite the enthusiastic predictions of its detractors. Let's stop there for a second. In the 6 years I think that we've been doing this, we've never seen the collapse of evangelicalism. It's been a really slow decline. It went up a little bit, but it's a slow decline. Whereas the others, denominations, mainline denominations and things, there's some collapses there, okay? Now, because of the SBC issue and some other things, we may be getting into a collapse. We may be coming to a collapse. We'll see what happens after, in a year or two. But anyway, there wasn't a big decline. However, here's the problem they see. However, what it is becoming, I think, is worthy of more conversation, said the director of Wheaton College, Billy Graham Center. There are significant implications to the fact that significant numbers of white Trump supporters now identify as evangelical or born again. We don't know why. And correlation does not always mean causation, but there is more study to be done here. In the past 2 presidential elections, white evangelical Protestants made up the core voting bloc for Trump, as they did for previous Republican candidates, including Romney, McCain, and Bush. But just 30% of non-white voters who identify as born again or evangelical Protestants, including just 12% of the black evangelical voters, reported casting a ballot for Trump. To historian Thomas Kidd, the possibility that Americans began calling themselves evangelical simply because they backed President Trump should be of concern to all pastors and committed churchgoers. Now, I absolutely agree. Now, it should be a problem if that is what is happening, okay? If that is what is happening. Now, let's do a caveat here, okay? In 2015-16, okay, when we started talking about President Trump and all the people who were coming up for election, we started talking about their programs, their platforms, and we started pitting that against the Democratic platform, which is pro-abortion, pro-gay rights, pro all this other stuff. And the Republican platform was fairly strong. It was fairly strong. I mean, really across the board, it was fairly strong. But with Trump, it was really strong. Do we agree? I mean, I think we can agree on that. Trump's platform was Christian. It had Christian morals in there, okay? I would say that. I wouldn't say Christian. They weren't preaching the gospel, okay? I need to be careful there. But they had Christian morals there, and they had America's morals, if you will, too, as well. So, but they were pro-life and pro-marriage and all these other wonderful things. Now, so what happened maybe is if Trump comes in, he becomes president, and he starts saying, this is where America's at, these are where our problems are, here's our Supreme Court justices, here's this, and he starts making these things, outlining these things, and people have to start making up their minds, don't they? Like, I am pro-marriage, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-this, so I guess I'm an evangelical, right? I mean, there's something to that. I think there's something to that. President Obama, when he came, people had to start making up their decision, their mind about him. You know, some of us made up our mind before he was president. When he became president, oh yeah, people had to start making up their mind, and the divide was there, but it became very visible, all right? When President Trump came president, the divide was there, and it became very visible. And I believe God is making people make up their mind. Are you pro-life? Yeah. Well, maybe I'm an evangelical, you know. You know what I'm saying? That kind of stuff I think is happening. And I think it's a good thing. I think God is calling out what we were talking about in Revelation and Jeremiah, Isaiah. Come out from amongst them, you know, and I believe that's what's happening. Now, are these true evangelicals? We don't know, but they're having to make choices. I'll just say this going forward, that from here on out, it just gets tougher, right? Because you don't have evangelicalism, you don't have Christianity without the gospel, right? And that's what it comes down to, is God, you're with his son, Jesus Christ, or you're not. That's the end game, okay? So far, so good with some of us. You know, the evangelical line is towing the way here, but the evangelicals are going to have to continue. You are going to have to continue to make up your mind going forward, because it's not just going to stop with Trump. Okay? This is, I just lost his name. This guy is it Michael? I can't remember this guy's name. I know it too. This is he's a good commentator from Fox. It was certainly the weirdest year. It began with a supremely weird decision by the entire world, except China and Sweden, to tank the global economy. No one has ever done that before. The only major economic power to grow last year was China, whose GDP is up by, I think, about 2.5%, compared to declines everywhere else, including some actually catastrophic ones, such as 11% in the UK. This decision to tank the entire global economy is something that strengthened China, the creator of the virus and the exporter of the virus, and weakened any opposition to China. Now, whether you believe that or not, okay, whether you believe that or not, there is something happening on the planet, all right? And we've talked about this somewhat, but Russia has had it with the United States. Iran has had it with the United States and Turkey. They have formed this coalition and they're working together, all right? They decided to work with China because China is sick of us as well. Now, they don't like each other. They don't like each other. And at some point, that'll play itself out. But right now, China its military might is increased substantially. This guy's saying the GDP, the economics, all of that is increasing substantially. Okay, China is growing according to them and many others. Now they've got some huge problems. They're still behind us in the military, but you saw the number of nukes that they're building over the last couple of weeks. They've increased their nukes dramatically, the number of their nuke weapons. Their population is in huge trouble. They had the one-child concept, and they were, killing their baby girls and only having one boy, and now that's caught up with them, and it's a big mess. Okay, they have to go digital. They have to go robot AI. Okay. But one of the things that they just cannot get away from, they just won't be able to do it, and actually nobody will, as much as they continue to push the Elon Musk cars and all this other stuff. The one thing that the nations cannot get off of, and that's oil. It is oil. And oil is driving the ideologies of Russia, in particular Russia. It is now played in a huge, into Erdogan's game to regain the Ottoman Empire with oil, the oil reserves that are underneath it. It's now playing into Iran's game, although they just want to destroy the earth, you know. And in China. China can't run without oil, and they have the biggest problem because they have the lowest reserves, okay? China is causing all kinds of problems. They're in the Alaskan waters, the Hawaiian waters, the Japanese waters. They're stealing ports, really, all around the world. They've moved into Israel. China's a big problem. Here's a picture. Here's a map. Okay, I'm going to get out my pointer. Right? Sonia? Ah, found it. There we go. Okay. Ta-da! All right. Here's China. And there's the Japanese islands up here. Taiwan is here. This is the big player right now. They're threatening Taiwan. Look how close it is. I mean, it's really easy for them to threaten it. The United States and the UK and others, as New Zealand, are going to say they're going to defend her. We'll see what happens. Here's the South China Sea. So China's main route to the Middle East is this way. It's this way. And by the way, there's not a lot of oil reserves around here yet. I mean, maybe they'll find some point. There's some, but they're not. Some of the biggest refineries, oil refineries for gasoline, are here because they have to transport the oil over there to make gas for these people, okay? They get, like we said, I think China gets not 85% of their oil from the Middle East, all right? Now, what is happening down here is very interesting and has been happening for a little while. On paper, the outcome of a China-Australia showdown looks like a foregone conclusion. China, a rising power with 1.4 billion people and a $14.7 trillion economy, should trample a country of 26 million with an economy less than 1/10 the size. But in a world wrapped in interdependent supply chains and complex political connections, smaller countries can wield a surprising armory of weapons. The US-led global order, still held together, barely, by common interests, long-standing relationships, cold strategic calculations, and deeply felt ideals, isn't ready to crumble before the march of the Chinese authoritarianism either. The story instead offers a more intriguing twist, a China that badly wants to change the world, but can't even change an uppity neighbor, okay? They are coming down on Australia in a huge way in lots of areas. And Australia is standing in their face. They're standing up in China's face and saying, we're of the West, and we're not going to take your stuff, okay? Now, what's happening? What is really underlying what is going on? Here's Australia. Here's the southern part, basically, of the South China Sea, the islands there, Indonesia, all right? There's a chain of islands that go around, the South China Sea's on the other side, China's just up the coast, all right? Here's Indonesia, and here's East Timor. Now watch. There's this 1972 seabed boundary. In the law of the seas, the nations get together and say, okay, here's the breaks, see? The breaks along these plates. Here's the boundary. So this is ours, and this is yours. That's how basically they do it. Okay, basically. Here's the midline between Australia and East Timor and Indonesia, okay? Here is a gas and oil field that East Timor has said, we own this. It's the medium line here. We're going out to the medium line, and we're going to drill here, all right? Australia said, no, you're not. That's a big problem, okay? Your shelf is clear over here. They have the same thing going on in Cyprus. There's the same thing going on in Turkey. Same thing going on in the Arctic with Russia and the United States and Canada, okay? Russia's saying, no, that we own the shelf, or all this kind of stuff, okay? So what happened is they made a deal and said, okay, I'll tell you what. let's do a joint effort here. So you go ahead and drill there, but we will work together here. This is East Timor and Australia, all right? Who do you think's backing East Timor? China. China is their primary backer. So now, all of a sudden, this is a huge problem between not just Australia and China, but the West and the East. Look how much these are the major gas fields, these are gas and oil fields. Look how much is there along this rift. By the way, who put those there? How come they're not over here? They're right there on this rift because God wants to cause a rift. That's what's happening. That's really one of the major issues behind the China and Australia thing. If you read through the papers, they're going at it like crazy, okay? Now, something else has happened, and it happened, I think, just yesterday or the day before. France recalls its ambassadors to the United States. Biden announces a nuclear military technology pact with Britain and who? Australia. I want to remind you of something. The ships of Tarshish, the young lions are still playing in that whole idea. The Five Eyes, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Canada, and the United States. We are a team. We're a team. We've always been a team. We're still a team. Sometimes we're not a very good team, but those five are a big team. France is not a part of that big team. So some time ago, Australia said to France, build us some submarines. And so they made a deal. I think it was 2016. They made a deal. And then going along, now China's raising its ugly head, and Australia wants to be out in front of it. The United States wants Australia out in front of it. They want Japan out in front of it. How can we help you? Oh, we can do better than the French. We can give you nuclear submarines. See, nuclear submarines are more quiet. Nuclear submarines don't use oil. Nuclear submarines are more powerful. They can make them bigger. You know, on and on and on. By the way, the United States makes the best, basically, in the world. There's some other good stuff, but so the other day, the Biden administration and the Australians signed a deal, and the UK was caught in the middle. The UK didn't really want to be in this, but they just got kind of pulled into it. And the Australians, the French are livid. I mean, they're livid. They took their ambassadors back. Hopefully it's a temporary recall, and maybe they'll work through this. I don't know how they're going to work through this. We'll see. But again, this strengthens the Dan and Sheba and the ships of Tarshish issue. It just strengthens that little coalition there, and we're going to have to continue to watch this going forward. This is making the Chinese really mad, as you can imagine. You're going to have nuclear subs in our backyard, and Australia, when they do something, they do it sometimes overboard, like the COVID. They do it pretty good, and so we're going to continue to watch to see how this plays out. It is all about business, economy. Oil is a big, huge part of that. Okay? Tunisia, just some real quick ones. Tunisia, the envoy says, peace cannot be achieved in Sudan. Why did I put this here? Because Sudan ended its civil war, supposedly, several months ago, but now there's problems in Sudan again. That means that, remember, they are a big part of the coalition that comes against Israel in Ezekiel 38, so they got to fix that problem. Another one, 2 Turkish A400 military cargo planes land in Libya. What does that mean? That the Turks are still supplying Libya with major arms. Two of these big cargo planes at once. So Turkey continues to say, well, we want peace, we want all the foreigners out of Libya and all that stuff, but they continue to send armory in, probably people, who knows what. But so that's not That's not settled either. Because Egypt now, we saw last week that Egypt is buying more arms. They're ramping up for this. They don't want Turkey in there. They don't like Turkey and them don't get along. So this continues to be a huge problem in Libya as well. Sudan, so that's Cush. This is put in Ezekiel 38. Big problems, not coming together real well. This is Iran. This is their biggest supply ship. Now remember, one of them sank. This is another one. And it did something, it broke a record here. The 75th Naval Fleet of the Army, consisting of the Makran big ship and Senhan destroyer, finally entered the territorial waters of Iran in the past few days after 133 days of navigation and 27,500 miles of sea route in the most unprecedented mission in the history of the Iranian army, and docked in Bandar Abbas on Sunday. Of course, Senhan and Makran on their way back crossed the Mediterranean, the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden. So I'm just going to skip that. That's the route that they took. Now everybody was afraid because remember they had the missile boats. I showed you a picture. They had the missile boats on it, this big ship going. Everybody thought it was going to Argentina and helping that mess up there. But they made a route up to, guess where they went? Russia. They went up to a military parade in Russia. They took this ship and all these speedboats and a bunch of stuff on these ships and went up to a parade in Russia. So that was fairly interesting. Let's go to Israel. Israel's emergence as a regional power has been accelerated by a perception among our Arab neighbors that the U.S. role in the region is being reduced. Therefore, Israel's role in the strategic calculations of countries in the region is becoming more important, and the need to work with Israel in terms of dealing with common challenges becomes more important. There is a concern not only from Iran's fanaticism and radical revolutionary policies, but also from the Sunni radical movements like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You have a situation where you've got this Iranian tiger, and you've got this ISIS, or whatever comes next. Then you have an 800-pound American gorilla that's leaving the building. And so they look around and say, well, there's this 250-pound gorilla wearing a kippah. That's fine. Maybe we should work with them more closely. If you want to focus on the chances of the Palestinians moving toward peace, don't focus on what diplomats in Europe or the United States are saying. Just turn on the television, look at what the Palestinians are watching, look at what they're reading, and then you'll understand whether or not you have a force here that is willing to compromise. There are Palestinians who would rather like to reach a compromise with Israel, but they are not the ascendant force today. So Bennett going to Egypt, and now he came to the United States, but he basically came and told the United States, Iran is close to a nuke, and we just need to tell you we're going to do something about it if you don't help us. All right? Now Israel, the United States said we're going to stand by them. I think Israel kind of took a step back today. The United States kind of took a step back this last week from the Iranian deal. We'll continue to see how that plays out. But now Bennett is going to these nations around and saying, we're not, for the sake of the Middle East, Egypt, one of the big dogs, you need to stand behind us because we're going to deal with Iran. And we can't count on the United States. Okay? That continues to happen. I'm gonna bypass this. Putin in the Caucasus. Okay, let's come to the United States. General Milley is worried. General Milley worried Trump would go rogue. He warned China's top general in a secret back channel phone calls. Now, I spent 22 years in the Air Force, and I can tell you, this is treason. This is treason. And if he doesn't get kicked out on his ear, Congress needs to do whatever they can. Even some of the Democrats are really upset about this because you don't go behind. See, this is a general and he's got a lot of stars on there. But you know who his boss is? His boss is the commander-in-chief. The president of the United States is the commander-in-chief. So that would be like us working for, let's say, McDonald's, and we're, let's say we're the manager. And we went behind the owner's back and did something wrong. What do you think the owner should do? Pretty much fire you. And that's what's going on here. And this is close to a coup. Close. This is treason. And this it's really bad if this stuff is going on. We already saw stuff like that happening in the FBI and some other places, the State Department. So our federal government is in a really bad way, and now it's come home to roost in the military. And I used to call the military, I remember, even in Hanscom Air Force Base, my last base, I would say, the military, and especially the Air Force, is the last foundation. It's the last frontier. We have our rights here. We can, we can act like Americans. We're still towing the line. That is not the case anymore. And it's really just very, very sad. Enough of that. Okay, let's get to our lesson for tonight. I'm going to pick on some issues as we go forward. I'm not going to try to name names. I'm just going to pick on some issues going forward so we can establish what is correct biblically and what isn't. And here's a few of those I'm going to probably maybe add to this list as we go along. Has the Psalm 83 already taken place? What is the role of the Israeli army in the second coming? The Antichrist comes out of the Middle East or he doesn't? Does he come into the Middle East from somewhere else? That's a clue. The Assyrian in Micah 5 is Sennacherib. Sennacherib fulfilled prophecies in Micah chapter 5. Now, I'm going to take the last one. I think I'm going to do Psalm 83 next week. But I'm going to take Micah 5 first because I mentioned it already. And although I loved the prophecy conference last week, was fantastic, and all those speakers are fantastic. And by the way, before I forget, we have another one coming up on the 26th. The 26th at 11:30, it will start here. Live stream at 11:30, and it goes to 9 p.m. And some really good speakers. I promise you, they're good. We're going to take the last one. We're going to talk about the Assyrian in Micah 5. Was he Sennacherib, and is Micah 4 and 5 finished? Okay? Before we start, the concept behind these is this. Okay? You can't dismiss Islam. You have to do something with them. You either have to get rid of them or they have to play it in part because there's 1.2 billion of them or something. They're huge. That's right here. Duh. According to study in 2015, Islam has 1.8 billion adherents, making up 24%, almost a quarter of the world's population. Most Muslims are either of two denominations, Sunni or Shia, roughly, and you got the numbers there. Okay, we've got that. And we have to do something with those. God has to do something with those. Now, whenever you take a text, you want the context. And really, Micah 5, if you read if you read the book of Micah, you read from chapter 1 through, you get the context of the whole book, okay? But for our study, we're going to start on this side of Micah 5. Micah 5 is the target, but let's set this foundation, because God does, for Micah 5 with Micah 4. In that day, whenever that context comes out, in that day, he's usually talking about the day of the Lord. But you got to read through and make sure that's what's happening. In that day, declares the Lord, I will assemble the lame and gather those who have been driven away and those whom I have afflicted. And the lame I will make the remnant, and those who are cast off a strong nation. And the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion. Stop. Now, we already know that's the last day, right? Everybody, that's clear. That's clear as a bell. God is aiming for the end times when his son, Psalm chapter 2, is reigning on Mount Zion. From this time forth and forward, and you, O tower of the flock, the hill of the daughter of Zion, to you shall it come. Now I want to remind you, it is my opinion, strong opinion, that whenever it says daughter or son, in a lot of ways, especially when it says daughter Jerusalem, daughter Zion, daughter Babylon, that's future. Because it's not the Babylon that was, it's its daughter. So that's the future generation, okay? So that's future as well. The former dominion shall come, kingship for the daughter of Jerusalem. Now, why do you cry aloud? Is there no king in you? Okay, so there's hope, because God says there's hope. Quit crying. Has your counselor perished? That pain seized you like a woman in labor? Writhe and groan, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. For now you shall go out from the city and dwell in the open country. You shall go out. You shall go to Babylon. You shall go to Babylon. Now back then you go, okay, wait a minute. Yeah, they are going to Babylon. Jeremiah is going to take them to Babylon. He's going to tell them to go to Babylon. Okay, I understand that. But wait a minute. It's talking about a king over us, and it's talking about him dwelling in Jerusalem. So what's happening here? It's a mixture of those two. A near prophecy, they're going to Babylon, and a far prophecy. And my opinion is they go to far Babylon in the future in tribulation as well. That's called the wilderness. More on that later. Okay? There you shall be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. Now stop. When they went into exile in Babylon, God rescued them. That's true. And that's why everybody says this is fulfilled. And it was, and yet it's not. Okay? How do we know? How many nations are assembled against you, saying, let her be defiled, and let our eyes gaze upon Zion? But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord. They do not understand. Boy, some of our own people don't understand his plan. That he has gathered them as sheaves to the threshing floor. Arise, watch. He's gathered his armies, his enemies. He's gathered his enemies to the threshing floor. All right? Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion. Wait a minute. Israel, did you beat up on the Assyrians? No. Israel, did you beat up on the Babylonians? No. So when you say, okay, now see, right here, having known history, hopefully, we have to say, stop for a second. Pause. Because this did not happen in history. What is he talking about? For I will make your horn iron, and I will make your hooves bronze. You shall beat in pieces many peoples, and shall devote their gain to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of the Middle East, the whole earth. Now, folks, I was watching something last night, another denomination, and I was looking at their eschatology, and it is strange. It's weird. And I understand. So, but I'm sitting there, and I took an hour, and I was going through, and I was listening to them, and I'm going, okay, this is what we've got to do, because see, we've read the Bible, and we study the Bible, and we've taken notes, okay? And we do this, and we go, now wait a minute. I know you said that, but what about this verse? I know you said that, but what about this idea? What's happening in here? What's happening in Jeremiah and Isaiah and Micah? What's happening over here? Because they go through Revelation and they went back to Jeremiah one time. You can't do that. They were going through this whole eschatological plan for a whole hour and only referred to the Old Testament one time. And they were wrong about that, their context of it. You can't do that. Now, folks, listen, I do know this. I know this. That there are teachers, there are administrators, those things that we have gifts, and that's some of our jobs. But, folks, what I am saying is that not every teacher is geared toward a good eschatology. And some of us are going to be very surprised. I think all of us, actually, are going to be surprised. All of us. All right? But we need to get as close as we can. And we can't skip Scripture. Because see, when they're talking about some of this thing, then they go, arise and thresh. Well, I don't know what he's talking about there. Who's arising? Who's threshing the enemies? Who is God talking to? Well, he must be talking to Jesus. That's not what it says. That's not what it says, and that's not what it's going to say in Micah 5. For I will make your horn iron, I will make your hooves bronze. Who's that? Is that Jesus? No. You shall beat in pieces many people. You shall devote their grain to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of the whole earth. It is Jesus. He will be leading the way. But watch. Micah 5. You can't separate Micah 4 and 5. All right? Now, we can make a good case out of Micah 5, but why separate them? Because the Lord didn't. We did. So right after he says their wealth to the Lord of the whole earth, then it says, so, if you could put a so in there, so, marshal your troops now. Well, wait a minute. Who are you talking to? Lord, who are you talking to? City of troops. For a siege is laid against us. Who's that? Well, that's the Lord, but somebody's on his side. Somebody's with him. They will strike Israel's ruler. Who's that? That's Jesus Christ. All right? That's not David. David's dead at this point. Okay? On the cheek with a rod. By the way, if you look up rod in the Bible, the Assyrian is the rod of God's anger, but God has a rod. And he's going to beat him with it. Verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who is to be ruler over Israel. That's the ruler. See, back here, that's right here. It says the ruler, the strike Israel's ruler. That's the ruler. Jesus, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son. That was then. Now Israel is born again. The son is born. Jesus was born. And then the son Israel is born in the day. And the rest of his brothers, that's Israel, return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock. Did Jesus shepherd his flock? No. He shepherded a flock of 11 people. 12 if you want to count the black sheep. Right? He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. Did that happen? No. His disciples were killed. I think except for John. John went to Patmos and died of an old age. But everybody else was killed, martyred. They weren't secure anywhere. And by the way, the church was spread to the ends of the earth, just like Israel, by the way. And he, Jesus, the ruler, will be our peace. Will, subjunctive, it's in the future. Jesus will be our peace when the Assyrians invade our land. Now, when you come in here and you pick Micah chapter 5, verse 5, and you read that, and you can say, well, that's when the Lord, the angel of the Lord came and killed 185,000 Assyrians, and that did happen. But you forgot chapter 4 and the rest of 5. You forgot the context of chapter 4 and 5 and actually all of Micah. You're not taking it in the context. He will be our peace when the Assyrian invades our land and marches through our fortresses. Real briefly, the biggest fortresses of Israel were beaten down by the Assyrians. They were at Lachish, they were building the rampart when he sent a messenger to Hezekiah and said, we're coming, be ready. He told all the people, don't listen to Hezekiah, you're going to die. And that's when the Lord sent the angel of the Lord that night, killed 185,000 people. And I was going to put a map in here, but it shows that Sennacherib came down basically along the coast, if I remember right, and then went, and another troop came down the center, and then it says he went back the same way, and he went back up there, and his sons killed him there. He did not die in the land of Israel. Land of Assyria with the sword. Stop. If you came to chapter 6, if you came to chapter 5 and verse 6, and that's all you read, you know for a fact that never ever happened. Never happened. They will rule the land of Assyria, not the Assyrian, not his troops, not his possessions, the land with the sword. The land of Nimrod, and that's the huge clue, with a drawn sword. Because he's going back to the beginning and he's going forward to the end. That's what's happening in Micah 5. That's what's happening in Israel, Isaiah chapter 7, Isaiah chapter 13, Isaiah chapter 47, Jeremiah 50 and 51. It's happening over and over. He will deliver us from the Assyrians when they invade our land and march across our borders. So you come back to 6, you read that a little bit and say, well, he delivered us when he killed the angels. I mean, when he killed the 185,000 with one angel. And that's not what it says. He says he will do it by his own hand. He will do it like David, and he will lead his troops. Then the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many peoples. Watch this remnant of Jacob. This little group, okay? They are in the midst of many peoples like the dew from the Lord. It's a really good thing. Fresh and wonderful. Like showers on the grass, which delay not for a man, nor wait for the children of man. Did that happen? No. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the nations in the midst of many peoples like a kitty cat? Like a baby? No. Because they're going to rule the land of Assyria with a sword. You can't have a baby or a kitty cat doing that. They're going to be in the midst of many peoples like a lion. And the beasts of the forest like a young lion, the strong ones, among the flocks of sheep, which when it goes through treads down and tears in pieces, and there is none to deliver. And the only ones who really did that was David, and only to some extent, and a few others, but nobody like David really. This is Jesus Christ. He's leading the Israelites to decimate the armies at the end of the tribulation. Your hand shall be lifted up over your adversaries, and all your enemies shall be cut off. And in that day, declares the Lord, I will cut off your horses from among you, and will destroy your chariots. And I will cut off the cities of your land, and throw down all your strongholds. And I will cut off sorceries from your hand, and you shall have no more tellers of fortune. And I will cut off your carved images and your pillars from among you, and you shall bow down no more to the work of your hands. And I will root out your Asherah images from among you, and destroy your cities, and in anger and wrath I will execute vengeance on the nations that did not obey. I think that's the end. That is the end. That's the end. Pretty clear. It's very clear that this is future, and Jesus Christ is going to come, and he's going to bring the armies of heaven with him. Real briefly, do you want to hear the astonishing thing? How can this man be an Assyrian when there is no current Assyrian power? This is a bad time to claim newspaper exegesis. Remember, I'm getting my terminology from the Bible or the newspaper. Don't listen to the newspaper. You can confirm it with the newspaper, but don't start there. Watch what happens. Watch this. The Iraqi prime minister becomes the first foreign leader to meet a new Iranian hardline president. Where's this at? In Assyria, if you will. Okay, in Assyria. Okay? Iraqi's prime minister, I just go there. Okay, now, here's the core of Assyria. This is where Ashur was. Now, it grew out, and just with its leaders, and it really became strong under Sennacherib and Tiglath-Pileser. Those were the strongest times during the biblical times, okay? But they were for 2,000 years, I can't remember, 1,000 years or whatever, they were strong. And I have actually a good video I might show you at some point. But this is where it's at. Where is this? Here's Syria, here's Iraq, this is northern Iraq. Who's in power there? The Kurds. Who comes down against them? The Turks. Iranians are coming in. Okay? Now watch. The Assyrians are a people who have lived in the Middle East since ancient times, and today can be found all over the world. In ancient times, their civilization was centered at the city of Ashur, the ruins of which are now located in northern Iraq. Assyria, the kingdom of the northern Mesopotamia that became the center of one of the great empires of the ancient Middle East. The Assyrian homeland, or Assyria, refers to areas inhabited by Assyrians. The areas that form the Assyrian homeland are parts of a present-day Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and more recently, Syria as well. Look, this just happened the other day. Mar Awa, a royal, is the 122nd patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East. This is dated September 9th. So two weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago. Okay? So there's your Assyrian leader of the Church of the East. Okay? I think I had another one. But anyway, so more on the Assyrian later. But again, I think the idea is that he is not a Muslim. He may be, but I don't think he is. I think he comes from somewhere else. I think he comes from Europe, and he establishes his leadership there, just like Antiochus Epiphanes. If Antiochus Epiphanes in Daniel chapter 7 and 8 are the preeminent type of the Antichrist, remember, he was Greek. He was Greek. His ancestry was Greek. But he grew up there, and he took power there, and that he was the typology there. And by the way, Alexander and everybody else wanted to come in there and conquer the Middle East anyway. So I think he comes from out of the Middle East and ends up there. That's why he's called the Assyrian. Okay, that's enough for, yes?
Real quick question, so that church, he's not really a Christian church you're talking about, or is that Assyrian Church of the East, so is that
So,
what
yeah.
are they?
Yeah, so they're basically the Catholic Church of the East, if you will. They're not Catholic, but they're Orthodox Christianity, and they're very like the Catholics. They work with icons a lot. They have these images. They have the same kind of doctrines, same kind of robes, and you know, the whole dress, orthodoxy. You know, that kind of an idea. Okay. And so I can't remember how many. We can get into numbers some other day. But anyway, they're alive and well, as are the Medes. The people of the Medes are some of the Kurdish people there. They call themselves the people of the Medes. They're not gone either. So anyway, that's kind of the idea, that we need to get out of the boundaries of our own thinking and try to understand really what the Bible is saying, literally, and what is being played out in front of us. Okay? Good question. Anything else? All right, I'm getting the time to eat. That's the I gotta eat thing. So, time to eat. Let's pray and worship. Lord, thank you so much for your grace and your mercy. We love you. You are our God, and we're so grateful for you, Lord God. Jesus, thank you so much for giving us a picture of what is going to happen in the Middle East, what is going to happen in the future, what is going to happen with us, at least as witnesses. As you take your remnant, and you take Judah and Ephraim and you stick them together as one stick, you make them whole again and love each other again and love you, and then they go and conquer and take their enemies back. Their enemies, the lands from their enemies. They plunder those who plundered them. So we just can't wait to watch this, Lord God, and glorify you as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.